What's up, guys? It's Eric. If you're new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button. It's all about mental health, mental illness, suicide awareness, just making sure that nobody goes through life alone. I wanted to share just really 5 common myths about PTSD. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor. I am diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, GAD, MDD. I've self-harmed before, I take meds, I see a therapist, I'm a recovering cocaine and alcoholic addict, and I lost a wife and a father to suicide. And it's my passion to help people and just sharing my experiences, resources, and everything that I can just so that somebody feels a little less alone in life. And I was reading an article from Psychology Today on 5 myths about PTSD, and it really got my brain thinking because there are still so many myths out there with PTSD. When it comes to PTSD, it is still really one of the biggest ones looked at is soldiers and first responders are the only ones that have PTSD or are diagnosed with PTSD. That is a really huge myth that's still out there. I think it's going to take a long time for that stigma to disappear, to understand that, people that have been through trauma of abuse, of sexual assault, can also form PTSD. Different traumatic experiences can form PTSD. So it's not just something that picks on first responders and military and says, hey, you are the only ones that are going to be able to have it. It is classified as a mental illness, and it does affect a lot of people out there. I'm going to do a lot more videos on PTSD too, because I get asked the questions a lot, even like, what's my PTSD trigger and what's my PTSD from? My PTSD trigger is the smell of blood, and it sends me into a full-on flashback, shaking, breakdown, disassociated, derealization mode. Like it's bad. I had done a video on my Patreon and showed literally the area of where my PTSD was, and I started shaking during the video. I couldn't do it any longer. That's the reality of what PTSD is, and I'm not military. I'm not a first responder. Mine was caused by my father's suicide. Another big, huge myth, I would say, of PTSD that they even spoke about is trauma is enough to develop PTSD. That's not true. Not everybody that is military gets, PTSD. Not everybody who's a first responder gets PTSD. And there's different symptoms too that you can acquire, and not just PTSD. That's the common myth. Is you can form acute stress, you can form insomnia, you can form anxiety and depression. Those all combined can maybe later on lead to a diagnosis of PTSD. But that's where you really want to get with your doctor and get help and get support with this to get the right diagnosis, to find the right types of treatment for you. Because the trauma is not always enough to form PTSD. A lot of times people say, well, I have PTSD from this. Make sure you get diagnosed. That's one of the things of why you don't want to self-diagnose, because that's what essentially adds to the stigma. That no, not everybody who has been through different things in life have formed PTSD from it. Otherwise, every soldier would have PTSD. Every soldier in that one combat situation would have PTSD. Every first responder would have PTSD. And that's not the case. It is mental illness, and it is selective, and it is non-discriminatory, and it will pick and choose who it wants to. Another misconception, a myth about it is people with PTSD are weak. That's not the truth. We've experienced something extremely traumatic that literally has shocked and ruined our fucking system. It is not a sign of weakness at all. You'd be surprised by the people who reach out that have PTSD and PTSD struggles. And believe me, they're badasses. A lot of these guys that I talk to with PTSD are fucking badasses. Some of the women are fucking badasses, but they struggle with PTSD. Not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of this is what mental illness is like. It's not weakness. It's fucking, you're fighting a battle that nobody else can see. I mean, PTSD, I always tell people it stands for pushing through struggles daily, because it can be that way. So it is no sign of weakness. Another big myth of PTSD, no thanks I think to the movies even, is people with PTSD are dangerous. We do hear these stories of people with PTSD that they have a flashback, they end up being extremely violent, they end up killing somebody, they end up hurting somebody, they end up grabbing guns, whatever it might be. There is this myth out there that everybody that has PTSD is going to be violent. So not the case. With PTSD, there is sometimes a violent side to it, but that's not always the case at all. A lot of us are dealing with guilt. A lot of us are dealing with our thoughts, the nightmare that doesn't stop. We actually shut down instead of lashing out. Like with my PTSD, there's no violence at all in me. I'm like breaking down, not in reality, and living a nightmare in my brain. There is no violence, lashing out, swinging punches, any of that shit. It is literally all here, not in the present. So having that conception that and that myth out there that people with PTSD are dangerous is not the truth. But again, get with your, if you do have violent outlashes or people have told you that, hey, you've been violent when you go through one of these flashbacks, get with your therapist on it, because help is there for you. I mean, the last big myth of PTSD is that PTSD can't be treated. And that's not true. I mean, yes, it can get as extensive as mood stabilizers, medication. I mean, medication does help with it. It does help with getting to sleep. And there are a lot of times that you are prescribed meds if you do have PTSD. But there's also prolonged therapy can even help. Sharing about that experience, owning that experience helps lessen it of how it affects us, sometimes even empowers us. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help. And the big one that is out there now that a lot of people are trying is EMDR therapy. Now, EMDR therapy, again, is not for everyone. Again, it's trial and error to find out what works for you. I'm not a therapist. EMDR therapy, though, was designed for military originally. Has a 77% effective ratio on helping remove those PTSD triggers. I know of a lot of success stories of EDMR. I also know of people that it didn't work for. That's where I'm going to end up doing a video even on the different types of PTSD, because I have PTSD. I've been diagnosed with PTSD. Now, there's also something called CPTSD out there, and they are different. And from what I've understood and what I've gotten feedback from people and all the people that I've talked to, is that EMDR therapy, if you had CPTSD, it doesn't really help. I don't know if it's true or not. Again, this is just the feedback and what I've been told. But those are really the big 5 myths out there about PTSD. And the more that we break the myths, the more that we share about them, the more that we are open about what we're going through, the more that it helps remove those stigmas. And if you are interested in finding out more and how to break those stigmas, I mean, do your research, do your reading. I mean, Psychology Today is a great resource. I read a lot of their articles. I do a lot of research on different things because I really enjoy this. I enjoy being able to share my experiences. Enjoy constantly being able to learn what I'm going through, because it helps in that trial and error process. It helps in that battle process of the shit that we go through every single day. So the more that we share about it, the more that we talk about it, the more that we can erase those myths out there. For anybody that is struggling with PTSD, get with a doctor, get with your therapist, make sure that you're taking your meds, and make sure that you're reaching out for support when you need it, because the worst thing is with PTSD, one of the things that we can resort to is self-medication, and that's through addiction. And that is actually another proven fact out there. I'll have to do a video on that. But a lot of us self-medicate. Alcohol is a medication numbing tool. I mean, we try to numb the bullshit instead of fighting through it. And that again is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of just stop this shit. So understand completely. If you are fighting out there, heart goes out to you. I get what it's like, man. I get it. And believe me, I'm proud that you're here today still. If you're, again, new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button. I do share a lot of videos of support, experience, just different tools, hacks, coping mechanisms, just trying to bridge the gap between a crisis hotline and therapy, of in between, making sure that nobody goes it alone, sharing everything that we've been through, that we can keep fighting forward, and reminding you that you matter. I mean, down below in the description, I do have links to all my different social medias out there. Do have links to the mental health Discord communities. It's peer-to-peer support. It's people helping people. It is free. I try to offer as many free resources as I can. I do even have the website for my nonprofit down below that gives you all the free resources for different countries, even whether it's NAMI, AA, NA, Al-Anon, just to try and get you some free resources in front of you to find what works for you, because it is trial and error. Down below also are links to things on Amazon that I use, such as fidget spinners, fidget cubes, things that I use to help me with my anxiety, help me with my ADHD, just that aren't medication, that are healthy coping tools. Even a link down below to BetterHelp, because you know what? It's trial and error with therapy. And if you've never been to a therapist before and you're afraid of being to a therapist, try it. It might help. I mean, again, it comes down to doing you, being you. Just do you. Find out what works for you. And don't give up. You're a BAMF. You're a badass motherfucker. You made it through 100% of your worst days to make it through to today. And you didn't come this far to only come this far. So hit that like and subscribe button. Let's do this together.